Cassandra Montgomery's heart thumped in her chest as she stepped into the hushed courtroom. Swollen with her unborn child, she held her chin high, determined not to show weakness. Across the aisle, perched confidently on a bench, sat Juliet Hastings, the stunning mistress of Cassandra's millionaire husband. An insidious, knowing smile curled on Juliet's lips. Everyone sensed the tension crackling like static in the air. But no one suspected how drastically everything would shift when the medical file came into play. In that moment, two women's lives, one heavily pregnant, the other glowing with rumors of her own pregnancy, were about to collide. No one was prepared for the truth that ultrasound would reveal. The trajectory of Cassandra Montgomery's life had always seemed predestined for elegance and abundance, born into the famous Lancaster family in Atlanta. Heiresses known for their philanthropic acts and exclusive business ventures, Cassandra was raised with the fine polish of Southern charm and contemporary ambition. Her father, Charles Lancaster, once sat on the boards of multiple high-profile corporations, while her mother, Evelyn Lancaster, arranged extravagant charity galas that raised millions. For Cassandra, splendor was a birthright, and yet she never let it dampen her sense of empathy. She volunteered at soup kitchens from the age of 14, and later began her own charity for underprivileged women pursuing higher education. Her path intersected with Richard Montgomery, the charismatic son of real estate tycoon Thomas Montgomery, at a black tie fundraiser for one of her mother's charities. Tall with dark hair, brushed back in a sleek style. Richard had a wide smile that could placate even the most skeptical heart. He had approached her with an air of confident humility, an uncommon mixture in the circles they frequented. Over a glass of sparkling champagne, they bonded over their shared desire to use their inheritance for good. Before the night ended, they'd already made arrangements to see one another again. In the months and years that followed, the couple became unstoppable. After a picture-perfect wedding at an Italian villa overlooking Lake Como, the Montgomerys soared to new financial heights. Richard, a talented deal-maker, launched a real estate empire with ambitious projects that saw profits balloon at unimaginable rates. Cassandra, meanwhile, continued her philanthropic work, winning hearts with her sincere devotion to community upliftment. But beneath the veneer of glamour, hidden storms brewed. Their circle was rife with envy, ambition, and temptation. Endless lines of people lured by wealth, power, and the glamour of the Montgomery name sought to attach themselves to the couple. Their love was genuine, yet the pressures were gargantuan. It would only take a single thread to unravel the tapestry. It began innocently, rumors whispered among the staff about a woman seen leaving Richard's office building late at night. Then the mention of a private lunch at an upscale bistro with an unknown brunette. The household staff, fiercely loyal to Cassandra, did what they could to shield her from the swirling whispers. But news has a way of seeping through cracks. At first, Cassandra brushed off the concerns. She had faith in Richard, the man she had built her life around. They had always communicated well. Open honesty was their bedrock. She refused to believe that the man who gave so much to their marriage would risk it all for a fleeting dalliance. Yet as the rumors continued to pile up, photographs, hushed gossip, even a paparazzi shot outside a luxurious spa, her confidence wavered. One afternoon, after an uncomfortable moment at a charity luncheon, where an acquaintance hinted at Richard's dinner guest, Cassandra confronted him. He seemed genuinely perplexed by her questions, offering quick reassurances. "It's business," he said. "She's just a potential investor. We're working on a complex project, Cass. I'd never keep something truly important from you." Cassandra believed him, or at least wanted to, but she couldn't help noticing the slight tremble in his voice. That was the first night she slept with an ache of doubt in her heart. As the weeks wore on, the staff observed Richard spending more nights at his office, citing that deals with international clients kept him awake into the early morning hours. His phone calls grew more secretive. Cassandra's attempts to connect emotionally were often met with feigned attentiveness. The gradual distance between them felt like a glacier forming cold, massive, and unstoppable. When Cassandra finally discovered the name Juliet Hastings, it wasn't because of a direct confession from Richard or an enlightening slip of the tongue from her acquaintances. Instead, it came in the form of a monogrammed scarf discreetly left in the passenger seat of Richard's BMW. Cassandra found it while retrieving some files she needed from the car. Her heart lurched as she read the embroidered initials JH on the expensive satin. She confronted him that very evening. In the living room, with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city's twinkling skyline, Cassandra's voice quavered, caught between anger and heartbreak. "Who is Juliet Hastings?" she asked, her eyes scanning Richard's face for any hint of honesty. Richard hesitated. His gaze flickered away. Then, in halting words, he revealed that Juliet was a potential investor from Europe, an heiress who wanted to expand into the lucrative US real estate market. He claimed everything was strictly business. The scarf was an unintentional leftover after he had given her a ride to finalize some details. But Cassandra's instincts screamed that this was more than business. Richard was too defensive, his body language too stiff. Whether he was entangled in a deep affair or simply flirting with the possibility was unclear. But one thing was certain: her marriage was in jeopardy. She excused herself and retreated to their bedroom, mind racing with worry and heartbreak. It was only the next morning that Richard confided a deeper truth. "Juliet might have feelings for me," he admitted, "but I've never pursued anything more than a business relationship." He confessed that he was flattered by her attention, especially during challenging times. He insisted that no lines had been crossed. Cassandra offered him a final chance at trust. "If there is anything more than business I need to know," she said quietly, "I need you to be sure you're choosing our marriage." He swore he was committed to her, and for a moment, Cassandra dared to hope that the worst had passed. Just weeks after the scarf incident, an announcement from Cassandra seemed to reset the clock on their marriage. She was pregnant. The news brought both joy and anxiety in equal measure. Cassandra had always dreamed of having a family with Richard. She imagined bringing their baby into a world of warmth and love. Perhaps she thought this pregnancy would guide them back to each other. She believed motherhood would anchor her soul, giving her renewed purpose even as her marriage faced unseen challenges. Richard's reaction was guarded excitement. Initially, he beamed, hugging Cassandra and proclaiming the child would bring them closer. But something in his expression suggested concern. Cassandra attributed it to the stress of fatherhood. Everyone in their circle celebrated the news, from her philanthropic friends to her parents, Charles and Evelyn, who had long awaited the birth of their first grandchild. A fleeting sense of marital bliss hovered in the Montgomery mansion. They planned doctor's appointments, pored over baby name lists, and teased each other about the baby's gender. For those few weeks, it felt like the threat of Juliet Hastings had evaporated. That illusion shattered one brisk winter morning. A letter-plain envelope, typed words, arrived at the mansion. Cassandra retrieved it from the mail before the staff. The message was alarmingly brief. "Your husband is lying. Check his phone messages or you'll never know the truth." There was no signature, no return address. Cassandra's hands shook as she held the letter. She looked around, half expecting to see a shadowy figure in the halls. Tension coiled in her stomach. That very night, while Richard showered, curiosity overwhelmed her. Despite the guilt knotting in her chest, She unlocked his phone. Confusion twisted into horror as she read the messages, romantic flirtations between Richard and Juliet, confessions of longing, a mention of clandestine meetings in luxurious hotels. The heartbreak was almost too much to bear. Then she spotted something truly shocking. Juliet was proclaiming she was pregnant as well. Cassandra felt the walls of her world crumble in an instant. She dropped the phone, her breath coming in sharp gasps. Somewhere in the house, water from the shower continued to run. Her heart pounded so loudly, she wondered if Richard could hear it. Another wave of sickness rushed through her part pregnancy and part raw betrayal. She fled the room just as Richard stepped out of the shower. Locking herself in the guest suite, she scrolled through those messages again, eyes tearing up at the lines that confirmed intimacy. Yet she forced herself to read everything. In the most recent exchange, Juliet had written, "I missed my period. The doctor says I'm pregnant. You wanted an heir. Now you have one." She could hardly believe this was her life. Everything felt surreal, like a poorly scripted melodrama. But it was all very real, and the emotional pain was suffocating. Over the next days, Cassandra avoided Richard with well-timed errands and pleas of exhaustion. She needed clarity before confronting him. She needed to know if Juliet was truly pregnant or using the claim as a bargaining chip. Cassandra decided the best approach was to gather evidence. She reached out to her family friend, Avery Johnson, a private investigator at Johnson & Walters Investigations. Avery had once worked on sensitive corporate cases, uncovering everything from espionage to personal blackmail. If anyone could sift through the facts, it was her. Avery Johnson carried herself with calm competence. She had grown up alongside Cassandra, and the two had once bonded over a summer job at a boutique law firm. So when Cassandra explained her suspicions through hushed phone calls, Avery reassured her. "We'll find out the truth, Cass, and we'll handle it discreetly." For 2 weeks, Avery discreetly followed Juliet Hastings, compiled records, interviewed local staff at hotels. The findings were catastrophic. Photos of Richard entering Juliet's penthouse at odd hours, charges on his corporate card for lavish dinners, plus flight logs that matched both their schedules to the same exotic destinations. The evidence left no doubt that an affair was ongoing. Even worse, Avery discovered that Juliet had indeed visited an obstetrics clinic, presumably confirming her pregnancy. The detective had no idea whether the father was definitely Richard, but it was enough to confirm that this was no empty threat. Meanwhile, Cassandra's anguish hardened into resolve. The child in her womb felt like the only pure thing in her life, an innocent soul she must protect. She sensed that confronting Richard would lead to more half-truths and manipulation. A voice in her head reminded her of her own identity. Cassandra Lancaster Montgomery, strong, philanthropic, born into a legacy of resilience. She wouldn't crumble now. Late one evening, after pacing the floor for hours, Cassandra decided to speak to an attorney. She needed guidance. They met clandestinely in a law office on the other side of the city, where she learned that if Juliet was truly pregnant and demanded recognition or inheritance for her child, a messy legal war could ensue, one that might jeopardize Cassandra's own unborn baby's stake in the Montgomery Empire. Worst of all, it could further damage Cassandra's emotional well-being. The lavish circles in which the Montgomerys moved were no strangers to scandal. However, this one rocked them all. It began with an online gossip column that published rumors of Richard's affair, accompanied by grainy photos of him leaving an exclusive restaurant with Juliet. A fury of speculation erupted. Some called it malicious rumor-mongering. Others insisted it was undeniable proof. Cassandra's phone lit up with messages from worried friends, opportunistic journalists and acquaintances seeking gossip. Each ping felt like another dagger in her chest. Richard attempted damage control, but his method, clumsy denials and blaming the media only fueled suspicions. Soon Juliet herself spoke to a reporter from a scandal-seeking tabloid, declaring she was pregnant with Richard's child. "I love him," she said with a sweet smile. "I only hope we can raise this baby together." That interview was the final straw. Cassandra refused to remain silent any longer. She released a brief public statement, confirming her own pregnancy, pleading for privacy, and stating that she was evaluating the situation. The statement read calm on the surface, but behind it lay heartbreak and steely determination. As the story spread, Cassandra received an unexpected phone call from none other than Juliet Hastings. The mistress demanded they meet. Confused and curious, Cassandra agreed, if only to look her rival in the eyes. They arranged to see each other in a private lounge at the Regency Hotel, one of Richard's prized properties. The lounge was empty, save for the bartender, who discreetly kept his distance after serving them. Cassandra arrived first, wearing a tailored black dress that hinted at her pregnancy. Juliet breezed in moments later, clad in a chic designer gown that hugged her slender frame. Her delicate features were overshadowed by an expression that combined triumph and a trace of anxiety. "Thank you for coming," Juliet said, her voice surprisingly gentle. "I believe we can settle this amicably." Cassandra leveled her gaze, ignoring the swirl of conflicting emotions. "Amicably? You destroyed my marriage." A subtle smirk tugged at the corner of Juliet's mouth. "I gave Richard what he wanted," she said softly. "I'm sorry if it hurt you, but I'm carrying his child too." The minutes that followed were excruciating. Cassandra listened as Juliet explained she had no intention of backing down. "Richard promised me everything. The wealth, the position. Even a future for our baby," she claimed. "I know you'll probably file for divorce, but let's think about the children involved. We don't have to tarnish their inheritance with an ugly battle. We can come to an agreement that benefits everyone." Cassandra almost laughed out loud at the audacity, but the tears brimming in her eyes betrayed how deeply Juliet's words cut. She found the mistress's confidence disturbing, and yet the proposition was so coldly pragmatic that Cassandra recognized a cunning mind. Juliet might be a gold digger, but she was no fool. She had singled out Richard for his fortune and influence, and she had no qualms about using her unborn child as leverage. Despite her sorrow, Cassandra refused to wilt in front of her adversary. She straightened her posture, energy pulsing within her. "Any child of Richard's deserves recognition," she said, voice calm. "But don't think I'll let you manipulate me. My baby and I come first." With that, Cassandra stood to leave, fully aware that Juliet wore a smug, victorious smile. One thing became clear. This affair wasn't merely an emotional betrayal. It was a threat to her family's legacy and her unborn child's future. When Cassandra returned home, Richard was pacing in the living room, phone pressed to his ear. As soon as he saw her, he ended the call, stepping forward with a concerned expression. "Cassandra." "Where have you been?" he demanded. "I've been trying to reach you." She dropped her purse onto the sofa and pinned him with an intense stare. "I met Juliet," she said, letting the statement hover in the silent air. Richard's face drained of color. What did she say?" Cassandra shook her head in disbelief. "She claims you promised her everything that you were planning, a life with her, including the baby. Her voice cracked. "Tell me, Richard, how long have you been deceiving me?" He stumbled over a response, his eyes desperate. "Cass, it was a mistake, a lapse in judgment. I let myself get swept up in the thrill. But I never meant to hurt you. I was going to end it." He ran his hand through his hair. "Juliet's pregnancy was unexpected. She caught me off guard. Yet you still kept seeing her." Cassandra's tone was flat, her sorrow overshadowed by anger. "There's no undoing the damage." "Now is it easier?" Over the next hours they argued in circles. Richard insisted he loved Cassandra and would do whatever was necessary to repair their marriage. She demanded he stop seeing Juliet, set up a legal plan for child support, if the baby was indeed his, and hand over full transparency bank accounts, phone logs, everything. Caught between guilt and fear, he acquiesced to each demand, promising full cooperation. But Cassandra remained unconvinced. His affair had stretched on for too long, and Juliet was cunning enough to keep twisting the knife. In a matter of days, everything escalated. Cassandra's lawyer drew up documents to protect her interests, while Juliet hired her own high-powered legal team to assert her claims. Rumors swirled that Juliet was pushing for a generous settlement, threatening to go public with even more scandalous details if the Montgomerys didn't comply. Into this maelstrom stepped the ironically calm figure of Judge Harriet Bennett, the presiding judge, who would later oversee the complicated lawsuit. She was known in high society for her impartiality and no-nonsense approach. The tension soared when the judge summoned them to a preliminary hearing to address custody rights, paternity tests, and financial disputes. Cassandra had hoped to resolve the situation without stepping into a courtroom, but Juliet's relentless pursuit of recognition for her unborn child left no alternative. In the days leading up to the hearing, Cassandra oscillated between heartbreak and fierce protectiveness. Every time she felt the baby move within her, her resolve hardened. She told her lawyer, "No matter what happens in that courtroom, my baby must come first." She also prepared herself for the possibility that she'd become a single mother if the only way to save her dignity was to divorce Richard once and for all. It was a spectacle when Cassandra, visibly pregnant, walked into the courtroom on the day of the preliminary hearing. Heads turned as her presence radiated both vulnerability and strength. Richard trailed behind, looking as though he'd aged years from stress and guilt. On the opposite side of the aisle, Juliet Hastings sat with a demure air, impeccably dressed in designer attire that barely hinted at her own pregnancy. She offered a thin, self-assured smile to Cassandra across the courtroom, a smile that felt like poison dipped in honey. The hearing began. Judge Bennett's gaze swept across the parties, her well-practiced neutrality concealing any personal judgment. Juliet's attorney, a smooth-talking professional named Daniel Rothstein, presented his client's side. She was in a relationship with Richard Montgomery, who had fathered her child, and she was seeking confirmation of paternity, financial support, and even partial recognition in the Montgomery estate. Cassandra's attorney, Melissa Walters, countered that any financial arrangement should await confirmation of paternity. Moreover, she pointed out that Cassandra, the legal wife, was also pregnant with Richard's child and had rightful claims of her own. As the legal dance continued, tensions soared. The judge ordered paternity testing for Juliet's pregnancy once the fetus reached a certain stage, reminding everyone that final rulings would only come after concrete evidence. In the interim, an arrangement for potential prenatal medical expenses and partial living costs might be necessary to safeguard Juliet's health. The hearing ended with a swirl of questions unanswered. Stepping out of the courtroom, Cassandra felt both relief at having advanced the process and dread at the knowledge that nothing was resolved. The cameras outside the courthouse snapped incessantly. She clutched Richard's arm for support, though she barely trusted him anymore. Juliet left through another door, accompanied by her lawyer, but not before casting that insidious smile again. In the aftermath, Cassandra found herself leaning on unexpected allies. Socialite friends who typically relished gossip now rallied to her side, supporting her with quiet lunches and words of affirmation. One friend, Samantha Holland, organized a fundraiser for Cassandra's Women's Scholarship Program and used the event to quell rumors. "We stand by Cassandra," she declared in front of the press. "She's a woman of class, generosity, and unwavering strength." In addition, Cassandra's parents Charles and Evelyn Lancaster stepped in with unwavering emotional and financial backing. Charles expressed quiet rage at Richard's betrayal, but focused on protecting his daughter's interests. He authorized the Lancasters' legal counsel to support Cassandra if necessary. "No one will mistreat my daughter," he vowed, making it evident that the Lancaster influence still carried significant weight in Atlanta's elite circles. Meanwhile, Avery Johnson's investigative prowess remained critical. She uncovered that Juliet had a history of targeting affluent men, though never with such success. A handful of minor lawsuits from previous entanglements hinted that she was no stranger to manipulative methods. Cassandra felt vindicated, but also uneasy. She realized she was up against a professional manipulator, someone who'd stop at nothing to secure her fortune. Amid the rising tension, Richard found himself ostracized by many peers. Associates who had admired his business acumen now distanced themselves, unsettled by the scandal. Even within his own family, he faced condemnation. His father, Thomas Montgomery, known for controlling the family's substantial holdings, expressed profound disappointment. "You had everything Thomas told his son, and you threw it away for a fling. If this ordeal harms our empire, it's on you." The harsh words forced Richard into a period of reflection. He alternated between frantic apologies to Cassandra and desperate efforts to salvage his business reputation. Sleepless nights spent in his office had him reevaluating decisions that led to this crisis. While his remorse seemed sincere, trust was difficult to rebuild. He promised Cassandra he would sever all romantic ties with Juliet, but the damage to her was near irreparable. She saw glimpses of the man she once loved, yet the memory of those texts and clandestine hotel visits lingered like an open wound. Just when Cassandra believed matters couldn't get more complicated, rumors surfaced that Juliet was preparing to release a tell-all interview. Supposedly, she intended to share private emails, pictures, and even a rumored love letter from Richard. The tabloids were salivating for new angles, and some unscrupulous journalists began harassing Cassandra about her plans for motherhood amid the scandal. It was during this relentless barrage of rumors and stress that Cassandra experienced abdominal pains one afternoon. Terrified for her baby, she rushed to the emergency room. Doctors assured her it was merely stress-induced cramping. They recommended she reduce her anxiety to protect her pregnancy. As she lay in the hospital bed, tubes attached to her arm, Cassandra realized she had to fight not just for her mental well-being, but for the life of her unborn child. She resolved that no matter what it took, she would not allow Juliet's manipulations or the paparazzi's intrusions to jeopardize her pregnancy. A few days after Cassandra's hospital scare, the second courtroom hearing loomed. This time it was more formal, with both sides set to present evidence about finances, alleged promises, and any demands that might shape the eventual settlement. Stepping into the courtroom, Cassandra felt an icy dread. Juliet was already seated wearing a fitted dress that did more to accentuate her now visible bump. She shot Cassandra a quick smile, a toxic blend of confidence and condescension. Richard looked like a man facing a firing squad, tension etched into every line of his face. The proceedings started routinely, attorneys discussing medical bills and required deposits for Juliet's prenatal care. Then Juliet's attorney claimed that Richard had promised her not just child support, but a stake in future real estate projects under the Montgomery umbrella, a notion that made Cassandra's attorney bristle with skepticism. But the turning point came mid-session when Juliet, under oath, testified that her doctor had identified potential complications in her pregnancy. She presented a sealed envelope containing ultrasound results and medical assessments. A hush fell as she explained that she needed immediate confirmation of paternal responsibility to ensure her fragile condition received the specialized medical attention it required, and that the Montgomery family would foot the bill. Cassandra watched the drama unfold, unsure whether Juliet was exaggerating or if real complications threatened the baby's health. Either way, it painted Juliet as a sympathetic figure, potentially swaying the judge's perspective. Cassandra could almost feel the narrative shifting. As Juliet handed her ultrasound findings over to the judge, Cassandra caught a glimpse of her face, a serene, almost triumphant expression. Juliet glanced in Cassandra's direction, that same lethal smile curling on her lips. The effect was chilling. It carried a message: I hold the power now. Cassandra's heart pounded. She told herself not to panic. Yet the swirl of possible outcomes rattled her composure. What if the judge forced immediate financial compensation? What if Richard was pressured to publicly acknowledge Juliet's pregnancy, overshadowing Cassandra's own maternal journey? The hearing continued mechanically with discussions about how the court would handle evidence of paternity down the line. But Cassandra was only half listening. She felt like a woman trapped in a nightmare, with each new revelation twisting the knife deeper. Meanwhile, Richard sat motionless occasionally, casting apologetic glances at Cassandra that did little to ease her suffering. Later that afternoon, after the hearing ended, Cassandra's lawyer approached her with a perplexed expression. "They gave us a copy of Juliet's ultrasound," Melissa Walters said quietly. "You should probably see this." The attorney led Cassandra to a private antechamber. There she handed over a file with black and white sonogram images and a written medical evaluation from Wanda Elaine Porter at Atlanta Women's Clinic. Cassandra's pulse quickened as she scanned through the documents, her mind snagging on unfamiliar medical terms. At first glance, the ultrasound images looked like any normal pregnancy scan. She saw what might be the outline of a fetus, but she lacked the expertise to interpret the finer details. However, the final page revealed a crucial piece of data. The embryonic age was listed at around 8 weeks. Cassandra mentally counted backward. 8 weeks from the present date would have placed Juliet's conception timeline at a moment that coincidentally Richard was supposedly overseas on a business trip in Europe. She herself had records of him calling nightly from Italy's Lombardy region. Could the timing be off? Cassandra's suspicions flared. The window for Juliet's pregnancy didn't perfectly align with Richard's known schedule. Either the dates were miscalculated or someone was lying. Cassandra texted Avery Johnson immediately. "Need you to look at these dates. This might be bigger than we thought." As the next few days ticked by, Cassandra's life became a blur of anxious waiting. She woke up each morning to a swirl of phone calls, social media gossip, and intrusive questions about the scandal. She hardly slept. Meanwhile, Avery Johnson dived into the new lead cross-referencing Richard's travel logs with the probable date of conception indicated by Juliet's ultrasound. Finally, Avery delivered a discreet call. "Cass, the timeline doesn't match up," she stated firmly. Based on airline records, Richard left Atlanta on the 10th of last month and didn't return until the 21st. The medical report suggests conception likely occurred around the 15th. If that's accurate, there's no way Richard could be the father unless the ultrasound is inaccurate or there's some other factor we're missing. Cassandra felt a surge of hope, a possibility that her nightmare might be an elaborate sham. But Avery cautioned, "We can't jump to conclusions yet. Ultrasound dating can have a margin of error. We need more conclusive evidence." Haunted by possibilities, Cassandra took a bold step. She requested her attorney to set up a meeting with Dr. Elaine Porter, the OB-GYN, named on Juliet's documents. Legally, Dr. Porter wouldn't be able to disclose much about Juliet's case without explicit permission, but Cassandra believed she might glean subtle clues just by speaking with her. When Cassandra arrived at the well-appointed Atlanta Women's Clinic, she felt the baby in her own womb give a gentle nudge. It was a reminder that she too needed to protect herself and her child. In Dr. Porter's office, a nurse politely informed Cassandra that patient confidentiality would limit what could be shared. Cassandra explained that she had no intention of prying into details, but she worried about the potential father's confusion regarding the timeline. She asked hypothetical questions about how ultrasound dating worked, whether stress or medical conditions could alter the gestational age assessment. Dr. Porter, a composed woman in her early 50s, maintained her professionalism. "Typically, the dating is fairly accurate. We always advise follow-up ultrasounds for confirmation. Margins of error exist, of course, but not usually more than a week or so." Cassandra left Dr. Porter's office more convinced than ever that something was off about Juliet's timeline. For the first time in months, she felt a spark of empowerment. Perhaps the devastating betrayal wasn't as it seemed. Maybe Juliet had manipulated the truth, forging a path to wealth by using Richard's name. Avery Johnson's investigative momentum didn't stop at the travel logs. She dug deeper into Juliet's personal history, uncovering a trail of short-lived relationships with other affluent men. None had escalated to pregnancy, but Avery found faint echoes of similar patterns. Illusions of closeness, promises financial demands, culminating in hushed settlements. This time it seemed Juliet had landed a bigger target, the Montgomery Empire. Avery eventually retrieved an alarming snippet of info. Juliet had visited a different clinic around the time she first announced her pregnancy. That clinic, Maplewood Diagnostics, provided discreet reproductive services. She might have sought alternative fertility treatments or simply inquired about a procedure. But the potential link raised another question. Was Juliet actually pregnant with someone else's baby? Or was she using medical records to craft a false narrative? Though Cassandra was still furious with Richard for his affair, her instincts told her that not everything was as Juliet claimed. Armed with Avery's findings, Cassandra prepared for the next court hearing with renewed determination. She was done playing victim in Juliet's chess game. When the next hearing convened, everyone expected more arguments over finances and paternity. But Cassandra's attorney, Melissa Walters, stunned the courtroom with new evidence. She displayed 2 sets of ultrasound images, one from Juliet's official file, another from Maplewood Diagnostics. The second set had been leaked anonymously to Avery. The fetal measurements on the Maplewood images indicated a gestational age far beyond 8 weeks, closer to 13 weeks. If both sets truly belonged to Juliet Hastings, it meant she had deliberately provided conflicting data to the court. Juliet's eyes widened in alarm. She shot up from her seat, attempting to interrupt the proceedings. Her attorney rushed to object, claiming the second set of ultrasounds were unverified and illegally obtained. Melissa countered that they'd soon subpoena Maplewood Diagnostics for authenticity. Judge Bennett, typically calm, showed visible frustration at the revelation. She demanded an explanation from Juliet's counsel, who fumbled for a coherent response. This was the pivotal moment. If it turned out that Juliet was further along in her pregnancy than Wu claimed, or if the baby's father was someone else entirely, it would change everything. The court erupted in murmurs while reporters frantically typed updates. Juliet appeared furious, her composure unraveling under the glare of scrutiny. During a recess, Juliet stormed out into the hallway, followed by her attorney. The press seized the moment. Cameras flashing microphones thrust forward. Cassandra remained inside, but from her vantage point, she could see Juliet's frantic gestures. Tension in the corridor sizzled like live wires. Richard, pale and shaken by the bombshell evidence, approached Cassandra. "Is it true?" he asked, voice trembling. "Could her timeline be off? Could this child not be mine?" Cassandra's response was frosty. "You should have thought about that before you stepped out on our marriage." She paused, swallowing back months of rage. "But if it means you aren't trapped by her scheme, then I want the truth to come out. My child won't share an inheritance with a con artist's fabricated claims." When court resumed, Judge Bennett demanded that all medical records relating to Juliet's pregnancy be submitted directly to the court under seal. Further, she ordered an immediate non-invasive paternity test once feasible. The tension in the room was so thick you could practically taste it. Juliet's attorney tried to salvage the situation, insisting that simple misunderstandings had led to conflicting medical data. But the damage was already done. Suspicion now hung heavily over Juliet's story. In the following days, a hush fell over the case as everyone awaited the results of the paternity test. Cassandra tried to refocus on her own pregnancy, scheduling a checkup with her obstetrician, Dr. Lana Brooks. This time, Richard joined her, eager to show support. The ultrasound technician turned the screen toward them, revealing a strong heartbeat and the tiny shape of their growing child. For a moment, they were just a couple, marveling at the creation of life. Cassandra felt tears well up, a mixture of joy and heartbreak for what their marriage could have been. Outside the hospital, Richard asked if they could talk. "I know I don't deserve your forgiveness," he began, "but I'll do anything to fix this, Cass. I want to be there for you and our child. Please just say there's a chance." Cassandra hesitated. She thought about the late-night phone calls, the humiliating tabloids, the acid-like pain of betrayal. Yet she also saw the man she'd once loved, contrite and frightened. "I can't give you an answer right now," she said softly. "But our baby deserves both parents if you truly mean to change." At last, the day arrived when the non-invasive paternity test results would be unveiled. Lawyers from both sides convened at the courthouse. Cassandra, Richard, and Juliet were present, each tense in their own way. Judge Bennett, with stern composure, opened the sealed envelope from the lab. Her eyes scanned the document before she spoke. "Regarding the unborn child carried by Ms. Juliet Hastings, the probability that Richard Montgomery is the biological father is—" She paused, letting the tension peak. 0%. A collective gasp rippled through the courtroom. Juliet jumped to her feet, her face a mask of panic. "That's impossible," she shrieked. "The test must be wrong. He's the father. We were together." But the paternity test was conclusive. There was no chance Richard was the father of Juliet's baby. The carefully orchestrated narrative she had spun for months collapsed in an instant. Judge Bennett's tone turned crisp. "Ms. Hastings, This court does not look kindly on deception. Your previous testimony included statements that appear to be false. I will be investigating potential perjury charges." Juliet sank back into her seat, her face blanching. Reporters rushed out of the room to break the scandalous news. Cassandra felt her entire body tremble with relief and vindication. Every malicious smile Juliet had cast her way, every humiliating moment, now dissolved under the truth. The revelations didn't just destroy Juliet's claim, it also forced a reckoning in Richard's marriage. The entire fiasco had started with his affair. Even if her pregnancy was fake or belonged to someone else, he had still broken their vows. As the dust settled, Cassandra made her own announcement to the press. She was separating from Richard indefinitely, focusing on her pregnancy and her well-being. The statement was neither vitriolic nor forgiving. It was simply resolute. For Juliet, the fallout was worse. She faced public shame, possible legal repercussions, and the end of her golden ticket to wealth. Whispers that she'd manipulated medical documents or employed unscrupulous tactics spread like wildfire. No longer the victimized mistress, she was exposed as a cunning deceiver who nearly tore a family apart for profit. Richard began therapy sessions determined to uncover how he'd allowed himself to fall prey to temptation and illusions of grandeur. He publicly apologized to Cassandra, admitting his betrayal had nearly cost him everything. The sincerity was there, but whether it would be enough to rekindle their relationship was a question only time could answer. In the weeks after the paternity bombshell, Cassandra rediscovered parts of herself she'd long neglected. She began attending prenatal yoga classes, forging new friendships with other expectant mothers who supported her without the burdens of wealth or scandal. She poured renewed energy into her charity work, focusing on scholarships for women who faced adversity, a cause that felt more urgent now that she'd weathered her own crisis. The Montgomery mansion felt less like a home and more like a relic of broken dreams. So Cassandra found a peaceful cottage on the outskirts of Atlanta, surrounded by ancient oak trees and flower gardens. It was a place to breathe, to plan for a future she'd raise her child in, with or without Richard by her side. Friends and family marveled at her resilience. "You're glowing," Samantha Holland observed one afternoon, visiting the cottage. Indeed, Cassandra's pregnancy now radiated an aura of strength, as though she'd harnessed her pain to forge a sharper sense of self. She felt the baby move often, each kick a reminder that life continues, even after devastation. Meanwhile, Richard grappled with the wreckage of his reputation. Several major investors pulled back from deals, wary of associating with a man whose personal fiasco had been splashed across media outlets. His father, Thomas Montgomery, set conditions for continued family support counseling, a moral rehabilitation, and the hope of reconciling with Cassandra. To his credit, Richard complied. He scaled back his once hectic lifestyle, turned down lavish parties, and underwent a genuine period of self-reflection. In a heartfelt letter he sent to Cassandra, he penned, "I know I don't deserve your trust, but I will earn it back day by day, if you let me. I can't change what I did, but I promise never to risk our child's future for my own selfish desires. If we do have a chance, I'll dedicate my life to proving I'm worthy." Cassandra read the letter under the dappled sunlight in her cottage garden. Tears of mixed emotions stained her cheeks. Part of her wanted to burn it. Another part of her remembered their fairy tale beginning. Regardless of whether they reconciled, she accepted that they'd always be connected through their child. Months rolled by, and Cassandra continued to flourish. She set up a new philanthropic initiative aimed specifically at supporting pregnant women who faced abandonment or betrayal. She used her own story, careful not to mention all the gory details, to illustrate how resilience could be forged from heartbreak. Donations poured in from sympathetic supporters who admired her dignified handling of scandal. Juliet, meanwhile, vanished from Atlanta's high society radar. Rumor had it, she fled the city for Europe, possibly under the financial support of the real father of her child, a lesser-known businessman. The public, now aware of her deceit, largely forgot her, moving on to fresh scandals and controversies. As Cassandra approached her due date, Richard's presence became gentler, yet consistent. He showed up to every doctor's appointment, took birthing classes, and stayed in touch, though he respected Cassandra's space in the cozy cottage. Slowly, they mended fractured lines of communication. Apologies turned into cautious laughter and shared memories. They weren't the blissful couple they once were, but each recognized the bond they would share forever through their child. The air was unusually calm that spring evening, with gentle rain tapping against the cottage windows like nature's lullaby. Cassandra had just settled onto the couch, a steaming cup of chamomile tea in hand, when the first sharp wave of pain rippled through her abdomen. At first, she thought it might be another false alarm. Her due date had come and gone 2 days prior. But the next contraction left no doubt. The baby was ready. Within minutes, the cottage turned into a flurry of urgent movement. Cassandra called her parents, who lived just 15 minutes away, and then Richard. Her voice trembled, but her spirit remained compassed. "It's time," she told him. "Meet me at the hospital." By the time she arrived at Northside Hospital in Atlanta, her contractions were just minutes apart. Nurses wheeled her into a private birthing suite, while her mother held her hand, whispering soothing words. Evelyn's presence gave her strength, a comforting anchor amidst the chaos. Richard arrived moments later, slightly breathless, his shirt soaked from the rain. For a second, Cassandra simply looked at him, so much history between them, pain and love, layered like sediment. But right now they were two people about to bring a life into the world. Nothing else mattered. Labor was long. It spanned hours filled with intense pain, deep breathing, and whispered prayers. The doctors monitored the baby closely, and at one point, a minor dip in the baby's heart rate sent a surge of panic through the room. Cassandra clenched Richard's hand, tears streaming down her face as she fought fear. But the medical team remained calm and efficient, and the baby's heartbeat soon stabilized. Just after 3 a.m., with the first soft light of dawn breaking through the hospital blinds, Cassandra gave one final push, and the room erupted in the first cries of her newborn son. Everything stopped. Cassandra collapsed back onto the pillows, her entire body trembling with relief. As the nurse laid the tiny infant on her chest, she looked down and saw him pink-skinned, wailing, utterly perfect. His little fists flailed as if announcing his arrival to the world. Cassandra wept, exhausted, overwhelmed and in awe of the miracle now resting against her. Richard stood nearby, tears streaking his cheeks. He leaned closer, brushing his hand gently against the baby's head. "He's beautiful," he whispered, voice cracking with emotion. "You did it, Cass." She looked up at him, eyes still misty. "We did it." In that room, for a fleeting moment, everything else faded. The courtroom battles the lies. The heartbreak, none of it mattered in the face of this new life. They named the baby Landon Charles Montgomery, a tribute to Cassandra's father and a nod to the strength of both family lines. When the nurse wheeled in a bassinet and the baby was swaddled and placed inside, Richard didn't leave his side for a second. He watched every movement, protective and tender, in a way Cassandra hadn't seen before. 2 days later, Cassandra returned to her peaceful cottage with Landon bundled safely in her arms. Richard helped carry their bags inside and lingered by the doorway, unsure if he should stay. Cassandra turned to him, her voice soft but steady. "This is home now, for both of us, if you're ready to earn your place again." He didn't respond with words. He simply nodded, eyes misting, and stepped inside. Their story was far from over, but in that quiet little cottage, with spring blossoms blooming just outside the window and the soft coos of their newborn son filling the air, it felt like they were exactly where they needed to be. The court battles had ended, the headlines had faded, and the cameras had turned their lenses toward newer scandals. But for Cassandra Montgomery, the true story was only just beginning. It was no longer about lawsuits, lies, or lavish betrayals. It was about rebuilding a life rooted in something real. Motherhood transformed her in ways even she hadn't anticipated. Landon's tiny fingers grasping hers became her anchor, his every coo a call to strength. She fed him under moonlight, sang softly to lull him to sleep, and found peace in the rhythm of their new life together. The chaos of the past months had given way to serenity, the kind that only comes after enduring a storm and realizing you're still standing. The cottage had become her sanctuary, nestled amid blooming dogwoods and chirping birds, a far cry from the marble-cold luxury of the Montgomery mansion. Here she could walk barefoot in the garden, host small tea gatherings for women from her foundation, and watch Landon nap peacefully in a cradle by the window. Her days were quieter now, but each moment held deeper meaning. Her charity flourished in unexpected ways. The public had seen her rise from scandal with poise and empathy, and women from all walks of life reached out, some survivors of betrayal, others struggling young mothers looking for support. Cassandra expanded her foundation to offer legal resources, mental health counseling and housing stipends for women facing crisis pregnancies. Her past no longer defined her. It empowered her to serve others. Meanwhile, Richard remained a quiet but steady presence. He didn't push. He came when invited, left when asked, and respected the boundary Cassandra had drawn. Slowly trust began to form again, not because the past was forgotten, but because he showed up for their son with a kind of consistency she never expected from the man who once disappeared into hotel suites and secrecy. He'd enrolled in therapy, not just for appearances, but to understand the root of his self-sabotage. Cassandra saw the change in him, not loud declarations or grand gestures, but small, steady choices. Like the way he held Landon during sleepless nights, the way he deferred to Cassandra on parenting decisions, or the way he finally listened without defensiveness. One quiet afternoon, Cassandra sat on the porch watching the sun dip behind the treetops. Richard joined her, carrying 2 cups of tea. For a while they simply watched the wind stir the leaves. "You've changed," she said softly, not looking at him. "I had to," Richard replied. "You gave me the wake-up call I never knew I needed." She turned toward him, her gaze steady. "I'm not promising anything. I'm still healing." I know he nodded. "I just want to be here while you do." It wasn't a reunion sealed with a kiss or a cinematic embrace. It was something quieter, more sacred. 2 people wounded by each other, trying to see if grace could exist in the same space as pain. As for Juliet Hastings, she faded into the background like a discarded mask after a play. Rumor had it she gave birth in a discreet European clinic, far from Atlanta's judgmental eyes. No lawsuits, no interviews, no more schemes. Her name became a cautionary tale whispered at fundraisers and garden parties, a woman who gambled with deception and lost everything. Cassandra, by contrast, became a quiet symbol of resilience. She didn't chase attention, but she couldn't avoid admiration. Her story was shared in op-eds, spoken about in university lectures on ethics and media. Yet for her, the only legacy that truly mattered now slept peacefully in a bassinet beside her bed. She had once walked into a courtroom carrying heartbreak and fear. Now she carried her child into a future filled with purpose, strength, and choice. Not every fairy tale ends with a perfect prince, but sometimes the heroine becomes her own happy ending. In life, deception often parades itself with calculated confidence, just like Juliet's smug smile in that courtroom. But when her carefully orchestrated lies were exposed, the triumph belonged to honesty and resilience. Cassandra's unwavering determination, bolstered by her love for her unborn child, became a powerful testament to the strength we discover in our darkest hours. She emerged with a renewed sense of self, reclaiming her future on her own terms. Thank you for joining us on this intense journey of heartbreak, betrayal, and the ultimate revelation that truth always finds a way. If this story moved you, if it made you reflect on the fragility of trust and the power of redemption, please remember to like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Your support allows us to continue bringing you stories that captivate the heart and inspire the soul. Until our next tale, stay strong, stay true, and believe in the power of love to guide you forward.